Now for our second topic, true stories versus fiction. Richard and Gary, what do you prefer to write and what format do you prefer to write in?
I was quite surprised at how kind of easy, in quotes, easy writing my autobiography was compared to writing scripts. I just thought it's so many more words, it's going to be so difficult, and I had to read it to make sure I understand it. But it was actually quite a lot easier than I thought it would be. But within that, I kind of go back to the storytelling thing because I still have to put my life into an interesting, engaging story. It just happened to be true. But I think that's one of the things I did early on quite well was I could see my own kind of journey, my own arc in the book, and I think that structure has always been there. So yeah, that was really interesting for me to see that process.
Would you think about adapting it into like a feature film script, or do you think it belongs as a novel?
Possibly. I think some of it is maybe worthy of a feature film, and then there'd be like maybe you'd have to invent other stuff to kind of put in the middle somewhere. So yeah, I think it's kind of it's definitely as it is. It's definitely a book, as it is. I think I'd possibly rather give it to someone else to see what they made of it if they were to adapt it, rather than me actually adapting it. I'm not sure where I would go with it. Maybe I might give it to Richard. I don't know.
Also, I know that you've written a monologue,
Yeah.
which is essentially based on a specific or it kind of covers only kind of part of what the novel,
Yeah.
What the book
Yeah.
covers. So basically, how did you find going from that to, basically expanding? I suppose you expanded it.
Yeah. Well, I think because my book writing and the monologue was also my first piece of theatre writing, and I got funding from the Arts Council to do both. So the Arts Council funded the first 30,000 words of my book, and the one-man play. What I said in the Arts Council funding application was the book would inform the monologue, and actually because of time constraints and when we were performing the monologue, it actually became the other way around. So the monologue informed the book. So there were some scenes from the monologue that are basically exactly the same in the book form because I'd heard another actor read it out and I knew it kind of read well. And that was really interesting. So that's why I kind of really want to do an audio book of my book so I can hear how that reads. And I think that'd be kind of really valuable and kind of, really kind of listen to it because I kind of read a lot of books on audiobook anyway. So, but the first piece of theatre writing was a really interesting experience and I definitely want to do more.
So, Richard, what format do you prefer? Do you prefer to write true stories or do you prefer fiction?
I prefer to, when I'm writing, I initially come up with a concept, like sort of an idea in which the story hangs around. Then I create like a cast of characters, and that's basically where it goes from there. I don't really base it on real life, to be honest. I kind of think because my early work is very much sort of based in sort of science fiction, space opera, in the middle of deep space, it's as far away from the sort of mundane reality of life. So there's quite a big gulf there. But I think as it's sort of developed, it's become a little bit closer to home with more sort of human themes and sort of emotions and stuff like that. But I wouldn't be able to write a book like Gary. I wouldn't be able to write an autobiography. It'd be about sort of 10 pages.
Short story, then.
Yeah, it'd be a very short story.
So you've also had some of your books read out.
That's right. I've had some of my sort of short stories read in audio form, which I definitely feel is a really good experience. I think for yours it'd be really good.
How do you find that helps having it read out?
I think it's essentially like a sort of script reading. You get a feel for the characters, all the different characters, their different sort of personalities, their different traits, and you also get to hear if the dialogue works. Basically.
Yeah.
So it's very useful for that, but it's also a different way of experiencing the story because we are storytellers.
Yeah.
And an audiobook is literally telling the story.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's good.
Do you think with sort of true stories and fiction, do you think they both kind of lend itself to both formats, or do you think maybe one kind of lends itself to one more than the other? So would you say true stories, maybe is more of a natural fit to novel writing, or?
I think writing has always got to have a bit of the author's sort of personality and experience in there, even if it's just sort of subconsciously. So, like, the main character can always have a few traits that are sort of, the author can identify with, or that are a contrast to what the author has.
Yeah.
So I think there's always going to be a little bit of truth in fiction, whichever way you write it. So,
and that's kind of interesting in films now, films that are based on the true story. Some of them have actually taken the label based on a true story off because they want the film to kind of stand on its own sort of legs and see how people react to the story without saying it's based on a true story. So I think that's quite an interesting way of looking at things.
It's quite interesting you say that, because even, I would say, films that are mostly fictional, like, I think one of the first, I'm sure there was probably some before, but Fargo kind of marketed itself as a true story. And even though what maybe, I don't know, only a small percentage was actually based on it. So it's kind of like, and also it's become quite a big thing with horror films. Horror films do like to say that it's based on a true story because obviously it brings things like, makes the audience think this could actually happen and therefore make things much scarier, essentially. So it's quite interesting, I think.
So what I said wasn't true, basically.
I think also with the sort of novel writing, it's more personal to the author, because with the sort of screenplay, it goes through several redrafts.
Yeah.
And the kind of, I don't want to say the writer gets forgotten with the screenplay.
But you get different writers on the screenplay.
Exactly.
You almost never get that on a novel at all.
I think collaborative sort of novels are rare. They're possible, but I think it definitely stands more as sort of like one person sort of, experience.
You have ghostwriters on some novels, but you never really get to know who they are.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think with true stories, like books, they, especially if the actual person has actually got a lot to say for themselves, or a lot has happened in their life. I mean, they can be, there doesn't have to be a set length to cover like all the aspects of their life, essentially. But with script writing, because obviously, time costs money, I think I know that with Steve Jobs' latest film, I think it covers up until the release of the first iMac. And so therefore it doesn't cover all for sort of, I suppose, iTouch, iPhone and all of that. So with film, I think because time costs money, they tend to maybe theme it or look at a certain angle of their life. And I suppose it kind of makes sense as far as the narrative structure goes, because obviously our lives don't, generally, I suppose you've got the obvious kind of beginning, middle, end. We're alive, middle, our life.
But that's actually one of the reasons why I liked about my autobiography, because I tried for several years to kind of write an autobiography of some sorts, but there wasn't, I didn't have enough kind of good memories that I could kind of say this is what I've started at, and there wasn't that change yet. I think when I'm looking back over maybe 10 years ago, I couldn't see that I've changed a big deal, but now more recently I could have, so I was able to write my autobiography. And actually it turned out pretty well.
Well, thanks very much for all your inputs on that topic, and now let's move on to the next part of the show, which is my introduction to my pit film.